Hi everyone, my name's Anthony Cummins, excuse me, and I'm now going to do a response video about samurai, the lower level samurai, and it's a response to Sengoku Studies, who's joining me in the playlist for the year, which is, we're going to go through monthly topics along with the Shogun and Nick and anyone else who wants to get involved. So here we go. Now what I'm going to try and do is keep this video a bit short and to go through things a bit slow and steady because I got told off for being all over the place and a bit too fast. So I'm going to break down some of the points from Sengoku Studies, and which is Scott, and basically what he's talking about is something that very few samurai enthusiasts talk about, and that's the agriculture and land and tax reforms and boring things, but it's really important, and I'm so happy that people like Scott are putting these things out there, because when we talk about samurai, everybody talks about a sword and their skills, and while they're absolutely real elements of samurai life, we do forget that the samurai were part of a very complex human society based on agriculture. In fact, remember, we were all hunter-gatherers before we became agriculturists and started eating off the land, which created a lot of distinction in social hierarchy. And today we're talking about that moment between samurai and not samurai. Is it ashigaru? Is it jisamurai? Is it a peasant? What is a peasant? You know, things like that. So let's go through those bits. So on the whole, a lot of people don't realize that Japan used to be a village society. Of course, it had its courts and its port towns and its minor cities, and you know, Kyoto was the capital and all that. But we're talking about most of the people, like most pre-industrial people, they live in rural, their rural areas, hamlets separated all over the place, and they brought their stuff to market. There was market towns. Some people lived in market towns, you know, in Europe, but you had to travel to market. All the old fairy tales are about traveling to market. I've got a cow with some beans and stuff because I'm traveling to market, and I sold my horse when I was traveling to market. So you have to remember, Japan is undulating land, mountainous land, flat plains with people coming from all over, and there's lots of connections between these people, and it isn't how you always imagine it is, because we only really get information about the Edo period. So when you think about samurai, most of what you think about is the Edo period, and when you think, okay, I know the Sengoku period is when the wars were, you try to superimpose that into the Sengoku period, but it was a different place. So Scott talks about kokujin, which are these, basically they're below lords, but they sort of run sections of people's communities, and these people were out in the sticks. They needed to be ruled and looked after, and there are people like kokujin. Now I've heard about this term before, but I don't know that much about it, to be fair. And he's got another term here which I'm sure I've written down somewhere, myoshu, which are local leaders. So you get this idea of the villages are full of hamlets and small farmsteads and farmsteads connected. Most of them, I'm assuming, or many of them, are run by samurai, but they have their servants there doing the stuff, and you've got the peasants in the land. We'll talk about peasants in a minute, and they're doing their things. But then there's groups that band together called iki, but there's also different people who take taxes and the different way that all works. I'm not trying to explain that system to you because I'll be honest with you, it's really complex. But the point I'm trying to make is you guys just need to realize that it isn't so direct. In the Edo period, you get a lord in a castle, in a town, and he speaks to the samurai, and the samurai go to the castle and go, yes, lord. And there's thousands of them. Like, I think it's Wakayama, maybe. I think Wakayama, or Odawara, I'm not remember. But basically had 7,000 samurai around this castle. So they're all personal bodyguards to the lord, technically. It's his personal army of 7,000 people. And that's not including the ones out in the wilderness. So what we find here is that in the past, villages are more popular. People are distributed more evenly across the landscape of Japan. Now, there is lots of what are called reforms where they change things. And what they do is the sort of samurai come along and go, hey, we can use this land better. We can introduce this rice crop better. We do all this. And Scott goes through all this in his video, much more detailed than this. And what happens is you get more crops, you get different merchants rising, some samurai falling, and you get a wave in society, yeah? That's why, well, not why, but you could claim that Ronin are called wave people, because they move along the waves. And society itself is like a sea. It's just a flat calm. Society itself, people rise, people fall, factions come together, factions go away. So you've got to see it like a sea like that. Now, back in these days, we have something called jisamurai, and these are landed samurai. And we've talked about this month. So these landed samurai. And what that means is they basically own an estate. And this is where the word peasant becomes really difficult, because we've got samurai, you know, lords, daimyo and all that, but even that, they change over time. But the word samurai and bushi tends to stay from, I think, roughly, from a guess, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, or Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, about the 10th to 11th century, the word samurai and bushi become intermixed, and where bushi is, I think, can be traced back to around the 5th or 6th century, maybe 7th, around there, but pre-samurai times, warriors were bushi. The samurai came out later, and then bushi and samurai came together, so that term sticks with the samurai throughout. But daimyos come in later on. You get these kokujin, and you get different things, like he talks about shoin, which is a way of, like, it's difficult to explain, but sort of managing land. Really, land management is the best way I can put it in such a short video. And this idea that land management changes and the agricultural management changes, and that means that has an effect on the people and samurai. And what you find then is we start to get ashigaru turning up, and that's, again, we've discussed. I personally believe ashigaru are separate from samurai, but there are people who argue that they are closer to samurai than they are to peasants and all that. And Scott rightly points out, he says, don't think of peasants as just these, you know, helpless seven samurai, Akira Kurosawa's Seventh Samurai. No, these peasants produced armies, and they were armed, right? Everybody forgets that the peasants were armed, right? And it's really annoying, because it's Hideyoshi who later disarms the peasants, and everybody just knows that. They say, oh yeah, the sword hunts by Hideyoshi, he disarms the peasants, but it doesn't go any further than that. People don't go, hold on, the peasants are armed, so what's the difference between a peasant and a samurai? And you're like, well, actually, again, in England, the word peasant didn't exist. That's some sort of more modern word. And you get different stratas of peasants. But I do disagree. Some personal to me is I don't like it when we sort of, people say, oh, you can't use that English term, you can't, because of connotations. I agree, there are problems, but the word peasant, we all get the idea, you know, they're peasants there, but they're armed peasants, which means they are sometimes extremely good at war. And they you know, they are powerful. It's not a case of, right, we'll get the samurai with the swords out and we'll go and kill them all because they've just got pitchforks. No, these people are two swords like a samurai, probably armor. In fact, there's a quote that always puzzled me at first. It's from my Book of Samurai series, and it says, when you're fighting peasants, the flags and strategies will look different, so you know they're not samurai. And I was like, how can a samurai really think that's not a peasant army when they're running at you with pitchforks and just, you know, brown clothes and no teeth, and you're like, and the samurai are all armoured? And I realised, I was, in my own mind, this idea of peasants had got over me too. I was like, no, the peasants were armoured, they were moving out in force, and they had flags, but they were like saying, the flags don't move like military flags. Military trained flags will move, and the signals going, everything's going out, shift that, division that way. So when you're looking from a distance, you're like, all these lower class people are attacking us. Yeah, but it's more just a rabble, which is still, if they've got the numbers, is powerful. So then, like Scott was saying, samurai, military trained people will come to band them together into ikkis. That's another word he comes up with, the ikkis, which are basically groups that come together to fight against something. And I'll talk about the Oda Nobunaga Ikki in a minute. So basically, what you're finding out there in the landscape of Japan, so put your mental image map on. You've got the landscape of Japan, yeah. You've got different nobles around the country. You've got court life, but you've got lots of these rural, expansive areas, and thousands and thousands of hamlets, if not 100,000 of hamlets, where samurai are living. Some are in town, some are out there, and there's different social connections between them. They're trying to unify the Japan into land management and make sure the most amount of rice is being used. Some people are rising high with money, some people are lowering. Some samurai have to do some part-time jobs. Other samurai are totally wealthy and have got loads of land and loads of farmers. And from that, you get like a sub-military class, the Ashigaru are rising, saying, okay, we're quite powerful now. And then the Ikkis are rising and saying, okay, that samurai over there is bullying us too much, so we're going to go against that. And then you've got the religious orders, which are basically, again, Japanese armor, Japanese swords. They look like samurai, except there's, you know, we all have the stereotypical cowl, but actually they pretty much look like samurai. The peasants can look like samurai, and the samurai look like samurai. And it starts to get a bit complex with who is who. And that is why the Edo period is really easy for us to understand, because it's like samurai, merchant, peasant, monk. And we're like, yes, 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 I understand that. But you go back in time and those sort of like distinctions blur a bit more, and it gets more complex. So to finish off, we've got Scott talks about Oda Nobunaga's invasion of Iga, and I'm so glad he did. This is one of my pet hates, because I'm the ninja guy, if you know what I mean. And Oda Nobunaga invades Iga because he hates ninja. Oh, I remember that story in all the manga and stuff. No, Oda Nobunaga invaded everyone. Everyone. It was just like, my name's Oda Nobunaga, I'm taking control of Japan. So he literally invaded most of Japan on his way to becoming the overall leader of Japan. And, or, you know, everybody capitulated and just went with him. And there's no way you would just leave Iga there and say, oh, we'll just carry on Iga. But Iga put up great resistance, and they had their own, you know, like, but ninja resistance. But no, they're just famous for shinobi. But the simple point is, he did take over them. He did take over them. And, you know, they did their best, but that is where the beginning of the decline of the shinobi starts there, where Oda Nobunaga takes control of their homelands, even though that is a far much more complex question than just can do there. So there we go, guys. I'll leave it there because we've hit past the 10-minute mark. So make sure you go and see Scott's video. Don't forget Nick's video, and if we're going to be doing next month's topic. So please, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying the series. Make sure you check the playlist. And you must subscribe to Scott from Sengoku Studies. I keep saying period, it's not. Sengoku Studies. You must subscribe to him. Links down below.